This is the 262 XP. I'm just putting the finishing touches on it. What I've got here is the cylinder head, and I'm doing some port work, and this video is not really designed to cover port work, mostly because I don't know what I'm doing. But rather than give you the specifics of the port work, I'm just going to show real quick that I am doing some port matching. So whatever I've done to the exhaust as far as widening it, I don't want to widen it too much, but it's pretty easy to stick a couple of bolts. These are, I think, M6, and they're short, in there to hold the gasket down to this the stainless heat shield here. All I have to do is run the Dremel in there and ream it out all the way around, and this will be matched. Then I also have to go to the muffler itself and match that, which is relatively easy. All I have to do is take the heat shield and put it up against the muffler, and then ream the muffler out accordingly, and that way the diameters are all the same, from all the way from the exhaust through to the muffler itself. Then we have to modify the muffler, of course, for better flow, but we'll worry about that later. So I've port matched the muffler, the gasket to the muffler, so now it'll flow pretty well. Then the next thing to do is to actually take this off, take the deflector off, and then go after opening that up inside the spark screen. So let's do that. And these screws are probably very significantly on there. A lot of heat cycles. So you can see the screws. 1, 2. So one thing certainly to check is the spark screen, and see exactly how gunked it is. And this one's not very gunked up. But based on, if I shine a light in there, you can see how small the hole is, hopefully. So, the answer is not too big. So I'm actually going to open that up a little bit, make it a little more free-flowing muffler. So I want to retain the spark screen so I can still use it in the woods without starting fires. So I'm going to open the hole up with the Dremel, put this back together. Actually, what I'll do is I'll paint it first, then I'll put that back on it, and then we can start putting the saw together. Much better. I'll clean it, paint it, spark screen, deflector, start putting it together. So I've got the cylinder head on with just 2 bolts and a gasket, and the timing numbers look pretty close. Intake is about 72. Maybe didn't quite drop it far enough, but it's darn close. Pretty close to 72. The transfers are right on 118. Exhaust timing is 103. So we have hit our mark more or less there. Next thing, I'm going to goop up the gasket and put the cylinder head home here. At least that's the idea. Cylinder's ready to go. Got to make sure the piston's ready to go with a new ring. So here's where we're at today. I've got the 262 XP piston here, pretty much ready to put everything together. I need to put a ring on this, so I'm going to do that. I got a little bit of oil on there. So I've got a new set of rings here, and fortunately these actually come by 2 rings, and I only need 1 out of the 2. So the piston itself is a little worse for the wear, but not too bad. I figured, you know what, rather than going with an aftermarket piston, just polish it up, put a new ring in it, and see how she runs. The ring should be freely movable in the piston. And there's an arrow on the top of the piston that demonstrates which direction it goes. I've got the needle bearing in here for the wrist pin already. Then what I'm simply going to do is push the wrist pin in. Look on that too. So this is the part where you tend to forget really crucial pieces, which is of course a bit of a misnomer because nearly everything on a chainsaw is actually a crucial piece. There aren't too many things on this saw that it actually runs without. What you don't want to forget next are the Circlips. So let's get the Circlips. So I'm going to do the Circlips now. The way to do this is to practice. And preferably to practice this off the saw, not on the saw. And on the 262 here, they actually did not make this very easy. There we go. The circlip has got to spin freely. Once it's in, it spins freely. So you need a tool to push the wrist pin and seat it to make sure it's out of the way and in the center of the throw. So needle bearing, circlips. If you forget either, the saw will literally eat itself. I put my thumb on here, this thumb, right there, and then do the circlip around, and sometimes it goes and sometimes it doesn't. Yep, it went. So let's start with some blue Loctite. So I've got some 515 evenly coated on both sides of the gasket. The piston is going the correct direction. more Loctite on the cylinder itself. Now, one spot you don't want it is in the impulse hole. Because if that gets plugged, it's a problem. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of 2-cycle oil. All the way around. Then I'm going to use my ring compressor trick. Just a zip tie. If you go out and buy a ring compressor, but you don't need to. So I've got a zip tie on the cylinder. You can do it with your fingers too, but sometimes it's actually easier to use the zip tie. So now we're ready to go. Ready to put this down. Exhaust this way, intake that way. Fairly obvious, but you can forget. Circlips are on, and they're freely movable, and the needle bearings in there, which we know. So we didn't forget anything. Now I'm going to simply clip the zip tie here. It's done its job. And the ring end gap looks good. Make sure the gasket is centered. And I can always put this bolt down first. At least we'll get one started that aids in the centering up of the gasket. Let's get another one started. That's down. That's down. And use the flywheel just to check basic movement. We have movement up and down. She goes. Let's get the other screws down. Again, a basic trick that I use a little bit of grease on the end that holds the head of the Allen, and then you can put this straight down. One. Two, 3, 4. Check with the T-handle. Got to go around again since we've got it ready, let's put the muffler home next. Spark screen goes down. Two screws go on. The paint that I use on this is very high temperature VHT flat black. Get it at an auto parts store. Used for headers. It's header paint. Supposed to withstand some very high temperatures. Which is why it's called VHT. Okay, so we're basically ready there, but I also need to put some red Loctite on this. So red Loctite on the muffler bolts. Gasket goes down. This gasket you actually have to do, it's not really, it's sort of threadable, so you have to thread it. So it holds, on the upside it holds. The heat shield goes like that. We've got two lower bolts here to put down too. Probably want some red Loctite on these too. A muffler falling off is not something you want. These look like the correct bolts, but I don't actually know. If somebody has better information, let me know before I start putting other saws together. When you're doing a project like this and it takes months, you kind of forget what goes where. So where I want to go next with this is to look at an intact saw. Well, mostly intact. And with this we can actually see what bolts go where. And what I might want to do next. I'm going to tear apart this saw anyway and make it run again. It might actually run, but either way I'm going to take it apart and mess with it. So I might as well scrounge parts off of it in the order that I need it. But at least this way I can use this as a reference. Of what goes where, what bolts are where. So I'm rebuilding the carb area. I'm going to put the wire on here first, then I'm going to put the choke thing on, like that. And then when I put the carb down, this piece will just go right into the carb here. One thing that I forgot to account for here is there's a partition wall that goes here. That's this piece. And the problem is that when you actually lower the cylinder, even by 20 thousandths, this whole thing is pretty rigid and it may not exactly fit. So I may actually have to grind a tiny bit away here with the Dremel. So I might just do that now, just to make sure there's enough play there for the partition. I've ground this part out so this partition's going to fit, hopefully. I'm going to attempt to put the carb down now, and hopefully we get it there. Some 515 here on these gaskets. An intake leak is a particularly bad thing. You will cook the piston cylinder in short order. Don't want to cover the impulse hole. Just want the edges here to be damp. Sealer. This particular gasket is going to go up against the carb here, which, suffice it to say, I've taken this apart and cleaned. I did not kit this particular one, mostly because I don't have a kit, but this one is quite clean inside. Now I've got all the goop on there, the 515. I'm going to put that gasket on there. Again, sealant kind of everywhere. Don't want it in the intake, but a leak here is a very bad thing. Seems to me that you have to have the throttle linkage attached as well. The other saws I've taken apart are actually considerably easier in that regard. So far, this looks like it will go together as a single piece. I've got the gasket good there. This green wire was over this rubber piece, so maybe that has something to do with something, maybe it does not. Right now this rubber piece is in my way. Let's take that out. Let's remove everything here and see what's messing me up. So I've got the gasket there, the partition here like that. Let's see if this goes down now. It really looks like you basically have to position the partition first. Otherwise, nothing seems to want to go in the right spot. That screw is in. This one needs to be positioned better, which it now is, and is finally grabbed. I know I'm not doing this right. Somebody somewhere has a better solution for me, I'm sure. Before I put this home, maybe it'll make sense to put this rubber piece back on here. Nice and tight. That's down. That's good. So I'd say that's reasonable proof that even though you lower the cylinder head, you can actually get the carburetor down. I don't see any particular visible issue. Good news there. One issue that I see that is definitely going to annoy me is the fuel line. I mean, could they have made it any tighter to the chassis? The answer is I can move that. So that will be quite convenient. Didn't know I could move that. Cool. So 2 bolts here hold this piece. That the whole thing is solid now. I'm going to bring this green wire through. There's a slot here that this actually goes through. So you can see what I'm doing. And over here is where you have to bring this through. just simply silly. Want to make sure that this flywheel actually fits. The other one did not seem to fit. And you also want to make sure that there's clearance between the flywheel and the cylinder, especially if you've altered things, but there's definitely clearance there, so that's not a problem. So let's put the flywheel down. Let's find the flywheel nut, which I believe is that guy. Some blue Loctite. There is a torque specification on this, and you do want to put it down to that particular torque specification. I believe that torque spec to be 13 foot-pounds. Somebody can feel free to correct me, but I'm pretty sure that's where that's at. So in order to get it down there, we need to use a piston stop, the rope, which is here. That. Back off the flywheel a little bit, pull the rope out, put the spark plug back just temporarily, just to keep any junk out of there. We don't want junk going in there. Let's do the ignition coil. These screws do not look like M5. Got a 4mm head on it, but they look smaller. I've got the ignition coil. I've got a new wire here. And I've actually never tried installing one of these before. It looks like this simply screws on. So I'm literally, I believe there's a thread inside here that grabs the rubber outer part of the spark plug wire. All I did was trim the wire to length. It came at a longer length, so I trimmed the wire to the length. This one was shot. I don't like this rubber piece. It's a little on the hard side. Seems to be pretty solid now, though. Okay, well, we'll see if that actually works or not. Looks like this just sits in there like that. 2 screws. A little bit of grease. 1, 2. Again, these are smaller, so you've got to be real careful with the amount of torque. I'm assuming that they made them smaller because they need a little bit of extra play one way or another. I'm going to use a business card. As spacer, have the magnet grab the coil and send the coil home. I don't have the air shroud, or rather air conductor that goes over here, and then you have to add the turbo air piece as well that goes up this way, and I'll get to that. So we're going to basically pause the project until we get those parts. Then we're going to put those in. So it'll take me about a week or so to get the parts in. And I'm trying to order parts for 3 saws all at the same time. It gets kind of pricey. So I take my time with that. Which is why these videos take me so long to create. How about the choke? Goes right on in here. And that just actually sits there. You know what? This rubber piece is actually kind of in the way of one of the choke levers. Well, that's not good. Pretty simple. Cut it out of the way. Yeah, so now those levers can actually move. That's pretty silly, but this is going to be really hard to see. But right in there, let's zoom in and see if we can show what I just found. Right in here, there's a white piece, and as you move the choke back, it comes up. You can see this comes up, and it bumps into this piece of rubber. That's kind of silly. Just fixed it. So we're going to pause, and I will resume this when I get a few more parts in.